The evening settles softly. The world grows quiet. The weight of the day loosens its grip, and the heart begins to find rest. The gentle rhythm of breath rises and falls. Each inhale drawing peace. Each exhale releasing burdens that do not need to be carried into the night. In this stillness, the soul finds space. A space where worries grow smaller, like shadows fading at dusk. A space where trust can rise, like the first stars appearing in the sky. Here, in the quiet, the heart leans closer to the presence of God. The world outside may still hum with noise. But here, within this moment, there is calm. The pace slows. The mind unwinds. The body remembers what it means to rest. Think of a quiet field at the edge of a village. The sun has begun to sink, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The air carries the faint scent of olive trees, of earth still warm from the day. Birds circle slowly, returning to their nests. The gentle sound of water lapping upon the shore drifts across the breeze. It is the Sea of Galilee. Wide, calm, carrying the reflection of the setting light. Upon its shore, people gather. Men, women, children. Some come with questions heavy on their hearts. Some with longing for healing. Some simply with curiosity. All come because they have heard of a teacher. A man whose words open more than ears. A man whose presence brings peace deeper than understanding. The crowd settles into the grass. Sandals set aside, garments folded loosely upon knees. Parents quiet children with gentle touches. Fishermen lean upon their oars, listening from boats pulled to shore. Elders rest their walking sticks upon the ground. Farmers pause from their labor, dust still upon their clothes. And there, in the center, stands Jesus. Calm. Steady. His voice carrying not with volume, but with clarity. His words moving like streams of cool water across thirsty ground. Before the story begins, he invites them into listening. Not with command, but with presence. His eyes move over the crowd, seeing each one as more than a listener. Seeing hearts, hopes, struggles. Each life a field waiting for the seed of truth. The air itself grows still, as though creation bends low to hear. And in this hush, the parable of the mustard seed is planted. But before his words are spoken, let your heart be prepared. For the story is not only about a seed in the soil of Galilee. It is about the seed of faith within you. Small, fragile, yet holding a future larger than you can imagine. As you rest in this moment, let your breathing slow. Inhale gently. Exhale deeply. Feel the calmness of the evening wash over you. Allow your soul to quiet, as though you, too, are seated upon the hillside, waiting for the teacher's voice. He will speak of small things, things overlooked by many, a seed so tiny it slips unnoticed between fingers. A truth so simple it can be missed by hurried hearts. Yet within that smallness lives the vastness of God's kingdom. Close your eyes, if you wish. Let the gentle rhythm of stillness surround you. Feel the peace of being present, not racing toward tomorrow, not grasping at yesterday. Only here. Now. In the care of the one who sees you. The story of the mustard seed begins not with power, but with quiet. Not with greatness, but with smallness. Not with strength already visible, but with promise hidden deep. And in this stillness, you are ready to hear. The lake stretched wide and calm, its surface touched by the glow of evening light. Fishermen's boats rocked quietly near the shore. Reeds swayed softly in the breeze. And all around, the people leaned in closer. Waiting. Listening. Hearts open like fields ready for planting. Jesus stood among them. Not elevated by throne or pulpit, but steady upon the same earth where they sat. His presence carried a peace that stilled even restless children. His voice was not loud, yet it carried across the water, over the grass, through the air. Clear, simple, full of life. He spoke of many things. Of fields and farmers. Of seeds and soil. Of lamps upon stands and treasures hidden in the ground. He spoke in parables, stories so simple they could be remembered by shepherds and children, yet so deep they could guide a lifetime. And then, he lifted his hand gently, and he told them this. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. At these words, some shifted slightly, exchanging puzzled glances. A mustard seed was familiar to all. It was the smallest of seeds they planted. So tiny it could rest upon a fingertip like a speck of dust. It seemed hardly worth noticing. Hardly worth planting. But Jesus smiled softly, as though to remind them that what the world dismisses as small, heaven sees as mighty. He continued, when planted, it is the smallest of all seeds. Yet when it has grown, it becomes the largest of garden plants. It grows into a tree, and the birds come to rest in its branches. The words sank into the hush of the evening. Simple. Clear. Profound. The people looked at one another. Some imagined the seed in their palms, almost too small to see. Some pictured the tall mustard shrubs they had walked past in the fields, taller than a man, branches wide enough for sparrows to nest within. And they began to understand. The kingdom of God does not begin in grandeur. It begins in smallness. It does not burst forth with sudden power. It grows quietly, steadily, like a seed hidden in the soil. It begins unseen, but becomes a shelter for many. Those who were weary heard hope in his words. For their faith, though small, was not despised. Those who were poor heard comfort. For the kingdom was not reserved for the mighty, but for any who would plant even the tiniest seed of trust. Those who doubted felt a stirring, for perhaps what little faith they carried was enough. The mustard seed, small, almost invisible, carried within it life abundant, strength unimagined, a tree where birds could sing, a resting place for the weary. And so it is with faith. A mother in the crowd held her child close, whispering softly as if the words might take root in her little one's heart. A fisherman rubbed the callus of his hands, remembering how often he had cast his nets with more doubt than trust. A farmer thought of the fields where he had scattered seeds by the handful, trusting the earth to yield what he could not control. Each one felt the parable press upon their soul, simple yet alive. The evening deepened, shadows stretching long across the hillside. And Jesus' words lingered in the air like fragrance carried upon the breeze. Not demanding understanding at once, but waiting to take root in the hidden soil of every heart that had ears to hear. For this was the way of his teaching. Not forceful, not loud, but gentle, patient, like seed in the ground, growing unseen until the time of harvest. The crowd sat in the hush of it, some with furrowed brows, some with softened eyes, some with a strange peace settling upon them. But all carried within them the seed of his words, the seed of faith, the seed of the kingdom. And as the lake reflected the last of the day's light, the smallest of seeds began its work. Not only in fields, but in hearts. The people listened in stillness. Jesus' words had painted an image so simple, yet so filled with meaning. A seed, the smallest they knew, and yet a tree so wide, its branches stretched to welcome life within them. In the minds of many, the image turned to the hands of a farmer. Rough, weathered, marked by sun and labor. He bends to the earth, the soil loose between his fingers. In his palm rests a seed so small it could be mistaken for nothing at all. A speck, a crumb of dust. The farmer does not dismiss it. He does not laugh at its size, for he knows what it carries. He knows the hidden life folded within its tiny shell. So with patience, he lowers his hand, pressing the seed into the earth, covering it gently with soil, not forcing growth, only entrusting it to the dark where roots will form. Faith begins like this, unseen, overlooked, held in trembling hands and planted in quiet trust. It does not announce itself with grandeur. It does not shout its strength to the world. It rests in God's care, hidden, silent, and yet alive. For who would believe that something so small could become something so great? Yet the farmer believes. That is why he plants. He does not see the tree yet. He does not hear the song of birds upon its branches. but he trusts that the promise of life is already within the seed. So it is with the heart that holds even the smallest faith. It may seem weak, fragile, hardly enough to endure. Yet in God's hands, it carries strength beyond measure. The farmer rises, wipes his hands upon his garment, and leaves the field quietly. He does not dig again tomorrow to see if the seed is growing. He does not fret that it is too small to matter. He trusts the mystery of God's design, that life unfolds in its time, that what begins hidden will one day stand tall. In the crowd by the lake, some thought of their own faith, so small at times they could scarcely feel it. A prayer whispered in doubt, a hope held in weakness, a single act of trust when courage felt gone. And yet, hearing the parable, they began to see that smallness was not failure. It was the beginning. For God delights in beginnings, in seeds too small to impress, too hidden to boast. He delights in planting them in hearts willing to trust, and in growing them into lives that shelter others. The farmer's hands remind us that the kingdom does not arrive through power or spectacle, but through quiet planting, through trust, through beginnings that seem almost invisible. A child in the crowd picked up a pebble and rolled it in his hand, looking at his father's palm where a mustard seed had once been shown to him. He whispered, "So small," and his father smiled gently, nodding, "Yes, small. But it grows." Oi! The mother nearby remembered nights of prayer for her family. Prayers that seemed small, unnoticed, perhaps unanswered. But now she saw them as seeds, entrusted to soil, waiting for God's time to bring life. The fisherman thought of faith spoken in haste before a storm. Words so small he had wondered if they mattered. Now he understood. Even the smallest prayer, the tiniest trust, was a seed. Planted, growing, unseen yet real. And Jesus looked upon the people, upon their faces softening in the glow of evening. He saw the seed already at work in their hearts. Not yet a tree, not yet branches wide enough for birds, but roots beginning to take hold. For the kingdom of God is not in the size of what you begin with. It is in the certainty that God Himself brings the growth. The farmer plants, and he waits. And in the waiting, life begins to stir. So it is with faith. Beneath the soil, where eyes cannot see, the seed rests, hidden in darkness, covered in quiet. The farmer has walked away, trusting the unseen. The field lies still. The world above continues its rhythm. But within the soil, something stirs. The seed waits. It does not rush. It does not demand to be seen. It lies silent. And yet its silence is alive. For within its tiny shell, the mystery of life has already begun. At first nothing appears different. Days pass. The sun rises, the sun sets. The rains fall, the breeze stirs the fields. And still the earth holds the seed in its secret keeping. Anyone passing by would see only bare soil. They might even forget something was planted there. But the farmer remembers. And he trusts. Faith often feels like this. Hidden. Unseen. As though nothing is happening. Prayers whispered into the night seem to vanish. Hopes planted deep within the heart appear to rest in silence. Yet within that silence, God is at work. Shaping, preparing, nurturing. For the seed must break before it can grow. Its shell must yield, surrendering what it was in order to become what it was meant to be. And so, in the darkness, the hard casing softens. Moisture seeps in. Roots begin to press outward, searching, anchoring. Stretching into the unseen depths. No one applauds the root. No one notices its quiet labor beneath the ground. But without it, there would be no tree. Without hidden work, there would be no visible growth. So it is with faith. It grows in hidden places first. Beneath the surface of life. Beneath the sight of others. In prayers whispered. In trust chosen again and again when answers seem far away. In acts of kindness no one sees but God. Above the soil, the world carries on, unaware. Children play in the fields. Birds wheel in the sky. Villagers pass by on narrow paths. To them the ground seems unchanged. But below, life is unfolding. Unseen. Unstoppable. The parable of the mustard seed reminds us that the kingdom of God begins where eyes cannot see. A heart turned quietly toward God. A choice to trust when fear whispers otherwise. A seed of faith planted in silence. These are beginnings that heaven treasures. Beginnings that will one day grow into shelter for many. The crowd by the lake did not see the seed in the soil. But they felt the truth in their hearts. Many of them lived with faith that felt small. Prayers that seemed unanswered. Hopes that appeared hidden. Yet Jesus' words reminded them that hiddenness is not absence. Silence is not failure. Darkness is not the end. A woman in the crowd pressed her hand against her chest, remembering years of prayer for her children. Prayers whispered without change. Prayers that seemed buried in silence. Yet in this story, she heard hope. That even seeds unseen are alive. An elder sitting near the front thought of his trembling trust, worn thin by years of hardship. He had wondered if his faith even remained. Now he saw that even the smallest seed, hidden in soil, carries more life than eyes can measure. And the children, listening with wide eyes, imagined seeds beneath the earth, sleeping quietly until one morning they burst through the soil. To them, it was wonder. To their parents, it was reassurance. To heaven, it was truth. For the mustard seed does not remain a seed forever. It waits, it breaks, it roots. And then, when the time is right, it rises. So it is with faith. In the hidden places of your own life. In prayers that seem unanswered. In hopes that feel forgotten. In love given quietly without recognition. Faith is alive. The seed has been planted. And though you may not yet see it, the roots are reaching deep. And one day, what is hidden will be revealed. What is silent will sing. What is small will become shelter. For the Lord who planted the seed is faithful, and He will bring the growth. The days pass, and still the soil looks unchanged. To the eye, nothing has altered. The ground appears as it did before. Bare, quiet, ordinary. Yet beneath, where eyes cannot see, the seed has already begun its sacred work. The hard shell, once unyielding, has softened. It has broken open. Not in destruction, but in surrender. For only in breaking can new life emerge. From that surrender, a tender root stretches downward, searching through darkness, reaching into unseen depths, anchoring the seed in the earth. And soon after, from the very place where the seed is given way, a fragile shoot pushes upward. Pale, thin, almost too weak to notice, yet filled with the will to rise. It is small, so small that it could be mistaken for nothing at all. A thread of green against a sea of soil. Yet it leans toward the light, as though heaven itself has whispered to it, "Come forth. Grow." This is how faith begins. Not in grandeur, not in strength already proven, but in small, fragile steps that reach toward God. Faith does not spring fully formed. It grows slowly, tenderly, pressing roots into trust, lifting shoots into hope. The farmer does not rush the process. He does not pull at the shoot to make it taller. He watches patiently, knowing that growth cannot be forced. It must unfold in its time. And so it is with faith. A whispered prayer in the night. A small act of kindness unnoticed by others. A single word of trust spoken through trembling lips. These are the shoots of faith. Fragile perhaps, but real. Reaching upward toward the light of God's presence. The crowd listening to Jesus could picture it easily. They had all seen it in their fields. The tiny sprout breaking through the soil. Barely noticeable at first, yet carrying within it the promise of something much greater. And so too could they picture their own faith. Small, fragile, easily overlooked. Yet Jesus' words gave it dignity, gave it worth. Even the smallest seed, he taught, can grow into something vast. Even the smallest faith can anchor itself in God and rise into life abundant. A child in the crowd tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering that he had seen mustard sprouts by the path. So tiny he could have stepped on them without noticing. She smiled softly, realizing the parable was not only for the wise but also for the young. Even a child could see the miracle in the small. An old man listening at the edge of the crowd thought of his prayers. Prayers whispered for years that seemed unanswered. His faith felt no larger than that small sprout. Yet in Jesus' words, he heard comfort. That what seems little is not despised. That what seems weak is not forgotten. Above them, the evening sky deepened. The first stars blinking into view. And still the people sat, listening, letting the parable sink into their hearts, letting the image of the tiny shoot become a mirror for their own souls. For faith does not need to be large to be alive. It only needs to be planted and nurtured and turned toward the light. The shoot trembles in the breeze. It seems breakable, too delicate to survive. And yet, each day it grows taller. Each day it strengthens. For its roots dig deeper, holding firm. And the light above calls it onward. So it is with the soul that trusts God. Faith may tremble. It may feel fragile. Yet it is held by stronger hands, fed by deeper roots, drawn upward by light beyond this world. And though the world may overlook it, heaven sees. Heaven delights in the smallest signs of trust. Heaven rejoices in the tender shoot that dares to rise from hiddenness into life. In the stillness of that evening by the lake, the parable of the mustard seed became more than a story. It became a promise that what is small will not remain small. That what is hidden will not remain unseen. That faith, though fragile, will grow. And so the shoot reaches upward, inch by inch. Not yet a tree, but no longer a seed. Alive. Becoming. So it is with faith. Beneath the fragile shoot that now leans into the light, something deeper is happening. Something hidden, yet more important than what can be seen. Roots. They spread silently into the soil. Thin at first, tender as threads. Pressing through darkness, curling around stones, seeking the hidden streams beneath. They do not rise toward the sky. They reach downward, anchoring, holding, drinking deeply. Their work is unseen, yet essential. The farmer knows this. He does not measure the strength of the plant by its height alone. He trusts what the eye cannot see. The quiet work below the surface. For a tree that will one day hold branches wide enough for birds must first hold roots deep enough for storms. Faith too grows like this. It is not built upon what others can see, but upon what God alone knows in the hidden places of the heart. The prayer is whispered when no one listens. the tears offered in secret, the choices of trust made in silence. These are the roots, stretching deep, anchoring faith in the God who sees. The crowd by the lake understood this in part, for they had watched their crops weather seasons of wind and drought. They knew that a plant with shallow roots could wither when the sun burned hot. But the one with deep roots, that one endured. So Jesus' story became more than an image. It became a mirror, a reminder that true faith must be rooted, not in sight, not in strength, not in self, but in the soil of God's faithfulness. The child who had whispered about tiny sprouts earlier now leaned against his father, drowsy from the long day. He dreamed of roots spreading under the ground like hidden rivers, strong, alive, reaching further than eyes could follow. His father, too, thought quietly, remembering times when faith had been tested, times when storms had come, times when only the unseen roots had kept him standing. A widow in the crowd pressed her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She had known loss, she had known hunger. Yet she was still here, still listening. She thought of her faith, small as a seed, hidden like roots in the soil. And she felt comfort. For though others could not see it, God had seen. God had nourished her in silence. Above them, the evening darkened further. The stars shone clearer. The air cooled gently. And the story continued to press into their hearts, like roots pressing deeper into earth. For this is the way of faith. It is not always about rising high quickly. It is about holding firm quietly. The roots of the mustard seed dig deeper still. They weave into soil, they push against resistance. They grow not in the ease of open sky, but in the weight of hidden places. Yet from that hiddenness comes strength. So it is with the soul. Faith deepens when it clings to God in darkness. Faith strengthens when it endures in silence. Faith holds firm when storms pass overhead. Not because it is mighty in itself, but because it is anchored in the one who cannot be moved. The people by the lake did not know yet how much they would need this lesson. For trials would come. Storms would rise. Their teacher would be taken from them. Their hearts would be tested as Abraham's was tested. And yet, if the roots of faith had gone deep, they would endure. Jesus' parable was not only about seeds. It was about them. And it is about us. For every soul is soil. Every heart receives the seed. And in time, roots either grow or wither. Unseen, but decisive. And the comfort is this: even the smallest faith, if rooted in God, will endure. It will hold firm when winds rise. It will drink deeply of His mercy when the world offers none. It will stand, not because of its size, but because of its source. The crowd by the lake could feel it, though they did not yet know the fullness of the kingdom. They knew the truth of seeds. And they knew the truth of life hidden below the soil. And so the parable sank into them. Silently. Like roots finding water. The night deepened. A quiet breeze stirred the reeds along the shore. The stars spread wider across the sky. And Jesus' words lingered like a blessing. Faith is not measured by what is seen. It is measured by roots unseen. And in your own heart tonight, faith is rooting. Even if you do not feel it. Even if others do not notice. God sees the roots. God strengthens them. God anchors you in His presence. So let the hidden places be enough for now. The roots are growing. The soil is nourishing. The unseen is alive. And one day, those roots will carry branches wide, strong enough to hold the songs of birds, safe enough to shelter many. For the seed planted in faith never grows alone. The tender shoot sways above the earth, its stem thin, its leaves soft, still fragile, but no longer hidden. It lifts its face toward the sun each morning. It bows gently in the wind each evening. It does not rush, it does not boast. It simply grows. Day by day, the shoot rises. A little taller, a little stronger. Its roots sink deeper, its leaves reach wider. The rains fall, the sun warms, the soil holds it. Each gift comes not from its own striving, but from the hand of the Creator who sends what is needed in its season. So too does faith grow. Not in sudden leaps that the world admires, but in slow, patient rhythms. A prayer whispered daily. A choice to trust when worry whispers otherwise. A moment of kindness given without thought of return. Each small act is like sunlight upon the soul. Each surrender is like water soaking into roots. The crowd by the lake could see it in their minds. A farmer walking past the small plant each day, watching it rise a little higher. At first it seems insignificant. A stem among many. Yet with each passing week, its presence grows. Until one day, it is no longer small. It is something sturdy, something lasting. Jesus' words planted that vision in their hearts. That what begins small does not stay small. What begins hidden will one day be seen. Among the listeners was a shepherd. He thought of lambs born weak, stumbling at first upon their legs. And yet with time, they grew strong enough to run across hills. He nodded slowly, realizing faith was much the same. Fragile in the beginning. Steady in the end. A mother in the crowd thought of her child's laughter. Small, uncertain at first. But now filling the tent with joy. She realized that her faith, though small, might grow the same way. Not perfect, not grand, but steady. Alive. And others, weary from burdens, heard hope in this picture. that they did not need to begin with great faith. They only needed to begin. For God Himself would give the growth. The shoot continues to rise. Its stem thickens, its color deepens. The wind pushes against it. Sometimes strong, sometimes soft. But each time it bends and straightens again. Learning resilience. Learning strength. This is how faith grows. Not without struggle, but through it. Not in the absence of wind, but in learning to lean and not break. Not in the absence of heat, but in drawing deeper water when the sun grows hot. Above the soil, growth may seem slow. A leaf here, a stretch there. But below, roots continue to spread. Deeper. Wider. Unseen but essential. Faith too often feels slow. Almost imperceptible. Yet over time, what once felt small begins to carry weight. What once felt fragile begins to endure. The mustard plant is no longer a mere sprout. It is something becoming. A promise unfolding. Soon, its branches will spread. Soon, its shade will cool the earth. Soon, its presence will be undeniable. And so with the kingdom of God. It begins in what seems too small to matter. A prayer. A word. A mustard seed of trust. Yet it grows. Slowly, steadily, patiently. Until it becomes a shelter for many. Jesus' listeners felt this truth settle into their hearts. Many of them knew what it was to feel small, overlooked, powerless. But now they understood. That smallness is not weakness when it is held by God. That what seems insignificant to the world may hold the very strength of heaven. The sky above the lake grew darker now. The stars brighter. The breeze cooler. And still His words lingered. Gently, firmly. Reminding them that faith is not about size, but about growth. About trust. About the steady work of God in the hidden and the seen. So too it is with your soul tonight. Your faith may feel small, fragile, unnoticed, but God sees it. God nourishes it. God grows it. And one day, it will stand tall. A witness not to your strength, but to His faithfulness. The shoot rises higher. Patient. Steady. Alive with unseen strength. And so too does faith. The days continue. The sun rises and sets, each one carrying quiet work unseen. The mustard plant stretches upward, its stem thickening, its leaves multiplying. What was once a fragile shoot now shows the strength of growth. Patience has shaped it. Seasons have nurtured it. Rain has softened the soil, sunlight has warmed its stem, and winds have taught it resilience. And so it grows. Not in sudden leaps, but in steady unfolding. Faith grows in the same way. Not always in great moments of triumph, but in small, quiet acts of trust. It grows when we choose to pray, even when answers seem far away. It grows when we continue to hope, even when circumstances appear unchanged. It grows when we forgive, when we love, when we trust again. Above the soil, the plant shows its leaves, stretching wider, lifting toward heaven. Below the soil, the roots continue to press deeper, holding it fast. Both hidden and seen work together. Unseen faith beneath, visible fruit above. The crowd by the lake could picture it well. Many of them had walked past mustard shrubs that towered above them. They had seen branches spread wide, casting shade upon the earth. They knew that no one who looked upon a tree in its fullness could imagine the tiny seed it had once been. So too it is with the kingdom of God. And with faith. It begins small. So small that it seems forgettable. Yet it grows. Until one day it stands as something undeniable. A tree among plants. A shelter among fields. A fisherman in the crowd thought of the nets he cast. How often they returned with only a few fish. Small, disappointing at first. Yet with patience, with time, the catch would come. He realized faith was like that. Not full at the start, but growing in the waiting. A woman sitting with her children thought of the bread she baked each day. How a small measure of leaven worked through the whole dough. How smallness became abundance with patience. Her heart softened as she realized her faith, though small, was enough to begin. And others, weary with burdens, felt their shoulders lift slightly at the thought. That God does not despise beginnings. That smallness is not failure. That faith, given time, always grows. The mustard plant rises taller. It sways in the wind, not as fragile as before, but steady. Its stem, once thin as a thread, now holds weight. Its leaves rustle like whispers in the breeze. Already, it promises more than itself. Already, it points to what will come. So it is with faith. It may feel quiet, unnoticed. Yet it is growing. And its growth carries more than we see. For faith does not remain within us alone. It expands outward, touching others, offering shade, offering rest. The parable reminded those who listened that the kingdom of heaven is not distant, unreachable, far above them. It is as near as the seed in the ground. As near as faith planted in the heart. As near as the slow, steady growth of trust in God's care. Above the lake, the sky deepened to a darker blue. The first stars appeared again, tiny at first, then more. Each one small, but together filling the heavens with light. The people lifted their eyes and remembered. Small does not mean weak. Small does not mean unimportant. Small can become vast. Jesus' words lingered in the evening air, steady and calm. The smallest of seeds becomes the largest of plants. the smallest of faith becomes a shelter for many. So too in your own life. Do not despise the small beginnings. Do not doubt the prayers that feel too little. Do not overlook the acts of love that seem unnoticed. For they are growing. Slowly, steadily, in the soil of God's mercy. The plant rises.
Taller now.
Stronger. No longer fragile, no longer hidden. But alive, becoming. And so too does faith. The mustard plant stands taller now. No longer just a stem with leaves, but something that begins to take its true form. Its branches stretch outward. First in small arcs, then wider, stronger. Reaching into the open space around it. The farmer, walking past, pauses to see. He remembers the seed he placed in the earth. So small, almost forgotten among the handfuls he planted. Yet here it stands. Larger than the herbs around it. Stronger than the grasses nearby. Its growth no longer a whisper of promise, but a visible testimony. This is the way of the kingdom. What begins as smallest grows into greatness. What begins hidden rises into shelter. What begins fragile becomes enduring. Faith mirrors this growth. A single word of trust, once whispered, becomes a prayer repeated often. A small act of obedience, once hesitant, becomes a pattern of life. A tiny moment of surrender, once trembling, becomes a rhythm of peace. The people listening to Jesus could see it in their minds. The way the mustard plant, once overlooked, becomes something no one can ignore. Its branches stretch so far that even the birds of the air find a place to rest within them. They could picture sparrows and doves circling down, perching in its shade, building nests in its strength. So too is faith. It is not only for the one who carries it. It becomes a blessing for others. It becomes shade for the weary, rest for the wandering, home for the searching. A young boy in the crowd leaned close to his father, whispering about the birds he had seen nesting in shrubs along the path. His father nodded, smiling quietly, and his eyes softened as he realized the parable was not about plants alone. It was about people. About hearts. About faith that begins in one life and becomes a shelter for many. A woman near the front remembered her own small faith. How she had clung to it through years of hardship. How it seemed so tiny at times. Yet now, her children rested beneath its branches. Her neighbors had found comfort in her kindness. She realized her mustard seed had already grown larger than she knew. The tree continues to expand. Its branches multiply, its shade broadens, its presence cannot be denied. No one looking upon it now could ever guess that it began as something so small. This is the promise of faith. It does not remain small. It grows. Not in sudden leaps, but in patient unfolding. Not in boastful strength, but in quiet resilience. Until one day it offers more than survival. It offers rest. Above the lake, the stars multiplied, each one tiny in itself, but together filling the sky with majesty. The people looked upward, then back at Jesus, and felt the truth sink deeper. Small does not mean powerless. Hidden does not mean lifeless. Beginnings do not define endings. The parable was planting itself in them even as he spoke. Seeds within seeds. Faith within faith. And tonight, as you hear the story, you too are invited to rest beneath those branches. For the kingdom of God, though it begins as a mustard seed, grows into a shelter. Not only for others, but for you. Let your heart rest here, in the promise that your faith, however small, is seen, is growing, is becoming something larger than you know. The plant stands taller, its branches wide, its shade gentle, its presence undeniable. And so too does faith. The mustard tree now stands full, its branches stretching wide into the open air, leaves trembling softly in the breeze, shade gathering beneath it, a presence no longer overlooked. And then, as if summoned by its welcome, the birds of the air come. First one, then another. Sparrows circling and alighting upon its branches. Doves cooing gently as they settle within its leaves. Small finches weaving through its shade, carrying twigs and bits of grass. Building nests in the crooks of its limbs. What began as the smallest seed has now become a home. What began as hidden has become a place of rest. What began as fragile has become strong enough to hold life beyond itself. This is the mystery of faith. It does not grow only for the one who holds it. It grows outward, offering shelter, comfort, hope to others who draw near. The people gathered by the lake could picture it vividly. They had all seen mustard trees standing in the fields, branches alive with birdsong. They knew the sight of sparrows finding safety, of doves nesting quietly, of wings resting after long flights. And as Jesus spoke, they understood that the kingdom of God is not only about personal faith. It is about faith that blesses others. The mother in the crowd looked at her children leaning against her side. She realized her small faith had already become a shelter for them, guiding their steps, comforting their hearts. Her life of prayer, though unseen by many, was like branches shading those she loved. A fisherman thought of his companions. How one man's steady trust had often calmed them in the storm. How one voice of courage could turn fear into peace. He saw that faith, even in one heart, could become shade for many. And perhaps some, weary from life's burdens, felt hope. That they too could find shelter. That even if their faith felt too weak, they could rest beneath the branches of another's trust until their own roots grew strong. The tree swayed gently in the evening air. Birds nestled closer, wings folded, hearts at rest. The farmer, passing by, smiled at the sight. For he knew the promise of the seed was not only in its growth, but in its gift. Not only in what it became, but in what it gave. So too with faith. It is never for ourselves alone. It becomes a testimony, a comfort, a refuge for those who cross our path. A single life of trust in God can ripple outward, touching lives unseen. Giving hope, giving rest, giving witness to the God who provides. The crowd listening to Jesus felt this truth settle within them. Some realized they were already resting in the faith of others. Some realized their own mustard seed, though small, might yet grow into a tree that would shelter many. Above the lake, the night deepened. The stars multiplied, bright and countless. Birds tucked their heads into wings and fell silent in their roosts. And Jesus' words lingered. Simple, steady, alive. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Though it is the smallest of seeds, when it grows, it becomes a tree. And the birds come and make their nests in its branches. So it is with your soul tonight. Your faith, small though it may seem, holds more than you know. It will not remain small forever. It will grow. It will stretch. It will shelter. And even as you rest, God is at work. Nurturing, strengthening, bringing forth life. Let your heart rest beneath those branches now. Imagine the cool shade. Hear the soft birdsong. Feel the peace of a home made from what was once a seed. The tree stands. Alive, strong, sheltering. And so too does faith. The tree stands full, branches wide. Birds nestled in its shelter. Shade spreading across the earth beneath it. What was once small, unseen, and fragile has become something strong, undeniable, and life-giving. And in this picture, Jesus revealed the mystery of the kingdom of God. For the kingdom does not come with fanfare. It does not arrive with armies or banners. It does not announce itself with noise or spectacle. It begins quietly, hidden in smallness, planted like a seed in the soil of the heart. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, he had said. And in those words, he showed them that God's reign does not depend on human power. It grows where it is planted, small as it may seem, until it fills the earth with life. Faith, too, is like this. For the kingdom of God is not distant. It is within. It is planted in the heart. It begins unseen, with trust so small it might feel like nothing at all. Yet in the mystery of God, even the smallest trust carries the fullness of his kingdom within it. The crowd listening by the lake began to see it. They looked at one another and realized that faith was not measured by size. It was not the greatness of belief that mattered, but the presence of trust, however small, planted in God's hands. A young man thought of his doubts, so many and so heavy. He had wondered if his small faith even counted. But now he understood that even a mustard seed of faith was enough. For the life within it was not his own, but God's. An older woman thought of her prayers, whispered over years, sometimes through tears, sometimes with weariness. Prayers that felt like dust scattered on the ground. And yet she realized they were seeds, planted, waiting, alive with promise. And others looked at Jesus himself, his presence gentle, his voice calm. No army at his back, no throne beneath his feet. And yet, within him was the kingdom. Within him was life. Within him was the very promise of God. Small in appearance, vast in truth. For the mustard seed does not remain small. It grows. And the kingdom of heaven, planted even in one heart, will not remain hidden. It will rise. It will spread. It will bless. So too with your own soul. Perhaps your faith feels small tonight. Perhaps it seems weak, fragile, unnoticed. But remember the truth Jesus gave. That the kingdom of God is within you. Alive. Growing. Carrying life larger than you can see. The smallest prayer holds power. The simplest act of love carries eternity. The quietest trust becomes a tree of shelter. Above the lake, the stars shone brighter. Each one small on its own, yet together filling the heavens with light. The people looked upward, then back to the teacher, and their hearts began to rest. For they realized that they did not need to begin with greatness. They only needed to begin. And God would bring the growth. And so it is for you. The kingdom within is not measured by what you see now. It is measured by the God who planted it. The God who waters it. The God who brings the harvest in his time. Let your soul rest in this truth. That even the smallest seed of faith holds the life of the kingdom. And that God himself is tending it within you. The tree stands. The kingdom grows. Faith endures. The mustard seed begins its journey in hiddenness. Unseen in the soil. Covered by darkness. Pressed down beneath the weight of earth. And yet it grows. Not because it is watched, not because it is noticed, but because life has been placed within it. So too does faith grow in hidden places. Not always in the open, not always in ways that others can see. But quietly, unseen, like roots stretching in the dark. The kingdom of God does not depend upon applause. It is not measured by crowds or recognition. It is measured in the quiet trust of a heart turned toward God. In prayers whispered when no one is listening. In acts of kindness given without thanks. In forgiveness offered when no one notices. These are the hidden seeds. Planted in secret, watered by grace, tended by God himself. The crowd by the lake began to realize this. Some had come thinking the kingdom would arrive with power, with soldiers, with thrones. Yet here was Jesus, speaking of seeds. Small, unnoticed, hidden. And in his words they heard something deeper. The kingdom grows where eyes do not see. It takes root in places the world overlooks. A mother thought of her long days at home, unseen by many. Tending children, kneading bread, carrying water. She often felt small, unnoticed. Yet now she realized that her faithfulness was seed. Her trust in God through her ordinary work was planting something eternal. A shepherd thought of nights alone under the stars. When fear crept in, when wolves howled in the distance. When he whispered prayers only heaven heard. He realized those prayers, though hidden, were not forgotten. They were roots stretching deep. And others thought of burdens carried quietly. Sacrifices made in silence. Tears shed without witness. They began to see that God's kingdom was not far from them. It was already near. Already alive in the hidden places of their lives. Jesus' parable spoke into the very soil of their souls, reminding them that what is hidden is not lost. What is unseen is not wasted. What is small is not without power. For faith does not need the eyes of the world to grow. It needs only the gaze of God. And his eyes never turn away. The mustard seed carries this truth within itself. That life unfolds where no one is watching. That strength is built in silence. That growth is nourished in hiddenness. Until one day, what was unseen rises into sight. So too does faith. Above the lake, the night grew deeper. Stars multiplied until the sky was thick with them. Each one a reminder that what is far and small still carries great light. The people lifted their eyes and felt a hush within their hearts. For the heavens themselves testified that hidden things hold glory. The teacher's words lingered. Simple, clear. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. And so they understood. It is not in grandeur that God's work begins. It is in the hidden trust of a heart that believes. Tonight, let your heart rest in this truth. Even the smallest prayer, whispered in secret, carries weight in eternity. Even the quietest act of love, unseen by others, is noticed by God. Even the smallest seed of faith planted in hiddenness will one day grow into something vast. Do not fear if your faith feels unseen. For Gud ses. Do not worry if your prayers seem unnoticed. For God hears. Do not doubt if your acts of love seem too small. For God remembers. The seed planted in hiddenness will not remain hidden. It will rise. It will grow. It will bless. For the kingdom of God is alive. In the hidden places. And within you. The crowd sat in silence by the lake. The words of Jesus hung in the air like the fading glow of sunset. Simple words. Yet words that reached deep. The parable of the mustard seed was not long. but its meaning lingered. Faces softened as the people turned inward, imagining the seed. So small, almost invisible, yet alive with promise. They thought of how easily such a seed could be overlooked. How easy it would be to dismiss it as nothing. And yet, within that seed lay a future no eye could see. A tree so large that birds would find rest in its branches. Wonder spread among them. Not the kind of wonder that shouts or startles, but the quiet wonder that grows in the heart. That stills the breath. That draws the soul nearer to God. A child leaned against his mother, whispering softly, so small. His eyes were wide, his voice filled with awe. His mother nodded gently, her gaze lingering on Jesus. Yes, small, but it grows. Oi! A fisherman scratched his beard, remembering days when his nets had returned empty. When faith had felt as small as the seed Jesus described. Yet he also remembered days when a single cast had brought in a catch too heavy to lift. He realized that small beginnings carried hidden strength. A widow near the front pressed her hands together in her lap. She thought of her own faith, worn thin by sorrow. She had often wondered if it was enough. But now, as she listened, she felt her heart steady. Perhaps her small faith was not weakness. Perhaps it was seed. The elders in the crowd shifted thoughtfully. For years they had studied the scriptures, waiting for the kingdom to come with power and grandeur. Yet here was this teacher, speaking of seeds and trees. They felt something stir within them. A glimpse that the kingdom was not about force, but about growth. Not about armies, but about life. The wonder deepened as they realized the simplicity of his words. Anyone could understand them. Yet no one could exhaust their meaning. The kingdom of God, as Jesus described it, was not far off. It was as near as a seed in the soil. As near as faith in the heart. Above them, the stars multiplied. Each one small, yet together filling the heavens with light. The crowd looked upward, then back to Jesus. And their wonder grew. For if God could fill the sky with countless lights, beginning from nothing, could he not also fill the earth with his kingdom, beginning from the smallest seed? The murmurs among the people were soft. Gentle words shared between neighbors. But their eyes kept returning to him. To the one who spoke with such calm authority. His presence was quiet, yet steady. His words were simple, yet alive. And in that moment, many realized they were not only hearing a story. They were being planted with a seed. His words were the seed. And their hearts the soil. The wonder they felt was the beginning of growth. Jesus looked over them with gentleness. He saw their faces, their thoughts, their questions. And he did not press them for answers. He simply let the parable rest upon them like dew upon grass. For he knew that seeds do not bear fruit in a moment. They take time. They grow in silence. The crowd's wonder was the sign of life beginning. The seed already at work within. And so it is for you. As you hear the story tonight, let your heart rest in wonder. You do not need to solve it, to explain it, to measure it. You need only to receive it. To let it settle within you like seed in the soil. For the kingdom grows not through striving, but through resting in God's hand. It grows not through force, but through trust. Not through grandeur, but through wonder. Let your soul be still. Let wonder take root. Let faith grow quietly. The crowd sat in awe. Their hearts touched, their thoughts stirred, their faith awakened. And the parable, small as a seed, began to grow. The crowd's wonder deepened. But more than the words themselves, it was the presence of the one who spoke them that stilled their hearts. Jesus stood upon the hillside. Not in robes of royalty, not with banners or armies, but simple, gentle, his face lit by the fading light of evening, his eyes full of compassion, his voice steady as water flowing over stone. He did not shout to command their attention. He did not demand silence. The quiet seemed to come naturally around him, as though creation itself hushed to listen. Every parable he spoke was like a seed scattered, not forced, not pressed into the ground, but released, to find its place in the hearts of those willing to receive it. Some would take root quickly, some slowly, some would resist. But his work was not to force growth. It was simply to plant. And the people felt it. They felt that each word carried life. Not the kind of life that entertains for a moment, but the kind that remains deep within. His words stayed long after the crowd dispersed, echoing in quiet thought, returning in moments of prayer. A young man near the front could not take his eyes from him. He had come out of curiosity, wondering why so many gathered. But now he felt something stirring. Not loud, not sudden, but steady. He could not explain it. Only that the teacher's presence carried peace unlike anything he had known. A mother held her child close. She watched Jesus' face as he spoke. And she thought, he speaks as if he knows the heart of God. As if heaven itself is near. Oi! Her child dozed against her shoulder, lulled by the sound of his voice. And she felt her own heart quiet with trust. An elder sat upon the grass, staff resting at his side. He had heard many teachers, many debates, many voices speaking of law and tradition. But none had carried this kind of weight. Not a heavy weight of burden, but a weight of peace. As though truth itself had come near. For Jesus was more than a teller of stories. He was the sower himself, planting the kingdom of heaven in the soil of human hearts. The people might not have realized it fully. But as they listened, they were receiving more than lessons. They were receiving life. And so it is with you tonight. You are not only hearing of seeds and soil. You are receiving the presence of the teacher through his words. His voice still carries across time. Gentle, steady, planting faith within you. Notice the quiet way he works. He does not overwhelm. He does not force. He comes softly, as a seed, as a whisper, as a presence that settles the heart. This is the way of the kingdom. It grows not through force, but through presence. Not through shouts, but through whispers. Not through weight, but through grace. Look now upon the teacher in your mind's eye. See him standing calm upon the hillside, the lake behind him glowing with the last of the light. The crowd rests before him, listening, leaning in. And you are among them, hearing his words not as history, but as life spoken into your soul. His voice carries peace. His eyes carry compassion. His presence carries the nearness of God. And in his presence, the smallest faith is enough. For he is the one who brings the growth. The night deepens. The first lamps are lit in the distance. The murmurs of the crowd soften. Yet still he stands, planting seeds with every word. Seeds of truth. Seeds of faith. Seeds of hope. Let your soul rest here, in the presence of the teacher, in the calm of his voice, in the gentleness of his parable. For he is still near, still planting, still growing faith within hearts willing to receive. The quiet teacher stands, his words a seed, his presence a shelter, his kingdom alive. And so too your faith, small though it may seem, is alive with his life. The parable lingered in the hearts of those who listened. It was more than a story about plants and fields. It was a story about their lives, about the faith each of them carried within. For every heart is soil, and every soul carries seeds of faith. Some are large, some are small. Some are strong, some are fragile. But all, when entrusted to God, hold within them the promise of growth. The mustard seed is so small it can be lost in the palm, brushed aside like dust, overlooked by those who do not know its worth. Yet when planted, it does not remain what it was. It becomes something greater. So it is with the faith you carry. Perhaps it feels too little, too fragile. Perhaps you wonder if it even counts. But faith is not measured by size. It is measured by trust. Even the smallest faith, when given to God, becomes alive with his strength. The crowd by the lake began to sense this truth. A farmer thought of his fields, how he had often begun with a handful of seeds so small it seemed impossible that they could fill the barn with harvest. Yet they always did, because life was not in his hands. It was in the seed. A mother thought of her children. The small lessons she taught them each day. Words of kindness. Prayers whispered at night. She often wondered if these little things mattered. Now she saw them as mustard seeds. Small, yes, but alive. Carrying within them the power to shape lives. A weary man, burdened by failure, thought of his own faltering trust. He had doubted, stumbled, fallen. He felt his faith was too weak to matter. But as he listened, he realized that even weakness could be a seed. If planted in God's soil, it would grow. Not because of his strength, but because of God's. Jesus' parable opened their eyes to the sacredness of smallness. For God does not despise small beginnings. He delights in them. He waters them. He brings forth from them life abundant. And so it is in your own journey. Each prayer you whisper, even when words feel heavy and halting, is a seed. Each act of love, even when unnoticed, is a seed. Each choice to trust, even when fear presses hard, is a seed. You may not see their growth at once. The soil may look bare, the field unchanged. But life is at work beneath the surface. God's Spirit tending, watering, strengthening. Until the day when faith rises. Until the day when branches spread. Until the day when others find rest within what has grown from your trust. The parable of the mustard seed is not only about what faith becomes. It is about what faith already is. Even in its smallest form, it is alive. Even when overlooked, it carries the kingdom within. The people at the lakeside felt this truth like a gentle warmth in their souls. They looked at the teacher and saw that his kingdom was not built by force, but by seeds. Planted in hearts. Grown in time. Spreading silently until the whole earth is touched. Above them, the stars shimmered. Each one small. And yet together they filled the heavens. And so too their faith, small though it might be, would fill the earth with light. And tonight, you too are invited to see your own life in this way. Your faith, though small, is not forgotten. The seeds you plant each day are not wasted. They are alive. They are growing. So let your heart rest. Let the small things be enough. For the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Small in beginning. Vast in its end. The parable becomes more than story. It becomes invitation. To trust that God is working. To believe that smallness is sacred. To rest in the truth that your faith, however small, is alive. The seed grows. The tree spreads. The branches shelter. And so does faith. The mustard tree does not grow without seasons. It feels the heat of summer. The dryness of days when rain does not come. The push of winds that bend its branches. the weight of storms that test its roots. Yet still it stands, for its roots have gone deep, deeper than the eye can see, anchoring it in soil, drawing life from hidden places. Its branches may sway, its leaves may tremble, but it endures, because it is held fast below the surface. Faith too must walk through seasons, times when prayers feel unanswered, when hope feels thin, when fears press hard and doubts whisper louder than trust. Yet still it endures, not because of our strength, but because of the one in whom we are rooted. The people by the lake knew this truth in part. They had seen crops wither in drought when roots were shallow. They had watched plants bend and break when storms were too fierce. They knew that what lasted was not what looked strong, but what was anchored deep. So when Jesus spoke of the mustard seed, they understood. Faith was not about avoiding struggle. Faith was about enduring through it, growing stronger because of it. A fisherman thought of storms on the sea. Waves high, winds fierce. How fragile their boat seemed in those moments. Yet always, if they held to their anchor, they endured. He realized faith was like that. Not keeping storms away, but holding steady within them. A mother thought of nights when her children were ill, when she prayed through tears, uncertain of tomorrow. Her faith had felt so small, but it had held her, carried her, given her strength she did not know she had. She realized her faith had endured, not because it was large, but because it was rooted in God. A man burdened with grief pressed his hands against his knees. He had lost much, and often felt his faith had withered. Yet here, listening, he realized it had not died. It was still alive. Small perhaps, fragile, but enduring, because God had not let go. The mustard tree becomes strong not by escaping storms, but by enduring them, by letting its roots grow deeper in the struggle. And faith grows the same way. The kingdom of God does not promise an easy path. It promises presence. It promises endurance. It promises that even the smallest seed, when rooted in Him, will not fail. Above the lake, the breeze shifted, cool and steady. It carried the scent of water and earth. The crowd felt the hush of the evening deepen. And in that silence, the truth of the parable settled even more deeply within them. Faith is not destroyed by storms. Faith is refined by them. For the seed that has taken root will not be uprooted. The tree that is anchored will not fall. The heart that trusts in God will endure, even when tested. And tonight, this is true for you as well. Whatever winds have pressed against you, whatever heat has dried your spirit, whatever storms have bent you low, your faith is still alive, still rooted, still growing. For you are held not by your own strength, but by His. Let your soul rest in that assurance. You do not need to fear the storms, for the one who planted you holds you fast. You do not need to fear the drought, for the one who waters you will never leave you barren. You do not need to fear the winds, for the one who shelters you is greater than the storm. The mustard seed endures. The mustard tree stands, and so does faith. The mustard tree rises strong, its branches stretching wide, its shade deepening upon the earth beneath. Birds nest within it. Travelers rest beneath it. Weary ones find comfort in its shelter. What began as the smallest seed has now become more than itself. It has become a blessing. Faith grows the same way. It does not remain contained within the heart of one person alone. It spreads outward, offering strength to others, comfort to the weary, hope to the searching. The crowd listening by the lake could see this picture clearly. They knew what it was to rest in the shade of a tree after long hours beneath the sun. They knew what it was to see birds find safety in the branches of something larger than themselves. And as they listened, they began to realize. Faith, even if it began small in their own lives, could grow into something that blessed others beyond what they imagined. A father looked at his children playing near the edge of the crowd. He thought of how his faith, though small, might be the shade they would rest beneath as they grew. He realized his trust in God would not only hold him, it would shape them, shelter them, guide them. A woman thought of her neighbors, the kindness she had offered quietly over the years. Small acts of love, prayers whispered in silence. She had not thought of them as much, but now she saw that they were branches, reaching outward, giving shelter to those around her. A fisherman thought of his companions, how one man's steady courage in a storm could calm the whole boat. He realized that faith spreads its strength outward. One life steady in trust can steady many. The mustard tree does not grow for itself alone. Its life overflows into blessing. And so it is with the kingdom. Jesus' words opened their hearts to this truth, that the seed planted within them was not only for their own salvation, but for the comfort and blessing of others. The kingdom of heaven is not only received, it is shared. It is not only life within, it is life overflowing. The people's wonder deepened. They began to see that their faith, small as it was, mattered more than they had believed. Not only for themselves, but for those around them. Above the lake, the night darkened further. The stars glittered like countless seeds scattered across the heavens, each one small on its own. But together they filled the sky with light. The crowd looked upward and felt their hearts open, for they realized that faith spreads like this. One light, then another, until the whole sky shines. And tonight, this is true for you as well. Your faith, even if small, is not for you alone. It becomes shade for those near you. It becomes comfort for those who see you trust when life is hard. It becomes strength for those who hear your prayers, even when whispered quietly. Do not think your faith too small to matter. For when God grows it, it becomes blessing beyond what you can measure. The mustard tree stands tall, its branches alive with birdsong. Its shade deep and welcoming. Its presence a gift. And so too is faith. The mustard tree does not keep its life to itself. In time, the branches that once reached outward begin to release seeds of their own. Tiny grains fall from pods, carried by the wind. Caught in the feathers of birds. Brushed away by the steps of animals that wander near. Those seeds scatter. Some upon the path. Some upon the field. Some into cracks of soil barely noticed. And yet, each one carries within it the same hidden life. The same mystery of growth. The same promise of a tree that will one day rise again. Faith is like this. It does not remain contained in one heart alone. It multiplies. It spreads. It takes root in the lives it touches. Sometimes in ways we do not see. Sometimes in places we would not expect. The crowd by the lake began to sense this truth. They saw in their minds the seeds falling from branches, carried far beyond the place of their planting. They realized that the kingdom of God would not stay hidden in one village, one people, one time. It would spread, reaching far across the earth. A father thought of his children again. He realized the faith he lived before them would plant seeds in their hearts. Seeds that might grow long after his life was finished. A woman thought of her neighbors who had watched her endure hardship with quiet trust. She realized her faith had already been scattering seeds. Even in silence, even without words. A fisherman thought of the stories he would tell after this evening. How the parable itself would spread, like seeds carried on the wind. He realized that the teacher's words were not only for this moment. They were seeds meant for generations. The mustard tree stands tall, but its story is not finished in itself. Its true legacy is in the seeds it scatters. In the new trees that rise. In the shade and shelter that multiplies beyond what the first tree could give alone. So too with faith. Your trust in God is not only for you. It becomes testimony. It becomes seed. It becomes life for others who see it, hear it, touch it, rest in it. The crowd looked at Jesus, realizing that his words were more than instruction. They were seed. Scattered into their lives. Into their children's lives. Into the lives of strangers who would hear the story told again. And already, the kingdom was multiplying. Already, the seeds were falling. Above them, the night sky stretched wide. Countless stars scattered like seeds across the heavens. Each one a light, small yet vast. and together they filled the sky with glory. So too would the kingdom, beginning with a few who listened on the hillside, but scattering far, across nations, across time, until the whole earth was touched. And tonight, this is true for you as well. Your smallest acts of faith are seeds. Each prayer whispered plants something unseen. Each act of love scatters life into another's heart. Each choice to trust when it is hard becomes seed for someone else to see, to remember, to receive. You may never know where all your seeds fall. You may never see the trees that grow from them. But God knows. And God grows them. The mustard tree scatters seeds. The kingdom multiplies. Faith spreads. And in the quiet of your own life, seeds are falling even now. Unseen, but alive. Rest in this truth. You do not need to measure your faith by its size or its reach. Simply live it. Plant it. Scatter it. God will bring the harvest in His time. The tree scatters seeds. The wind carries them. Life multiplies. And so does faith. The mustard tree continues to stand. Season after season. Storms pass, rains fall, winds shift, but still its branches remain. Strong. Steady. Offering shade, offering rest. And though one day its life will fade, its seeds will already have scattered. Carried on the breeze, pressed into soil, planted in hidden places. And from those seeds, new trees will rise. So too is faith. It does not end with one life alone. It stretches beyond. Into children, into neighbors, into strangers who see and are touched. Faith multiplies not only in the present, but across time, enduring through generations. The people by the lake did not yet see how far this parable would reach. They could not imagine how the story of a mustard seed told on a hillside would still be alive centuries later. Spoken across nations, repeated in countless tongues, planting faith in hearts they would never meet. But this is the way of the kingdom. It endures. It multiplies. It reaches beyond what we can see. A father in the crowd thought of his son, sitting beside him, listening quietly. He realized that even if his own faith felt small, it could be a seed for his child. And through his child, for others yet unborn. A mother looked at her daughter leaning against her, eyes heavy with sleep. She thought of how her faith, though tested, could endure in the heart of the one she carried close. She realized that her trust in God might outlive her, growing into a tree of blessing for her daughter's children and beyond. An elder in the crowd thought of the promises spoken to Abraham. Promises of descendants as countless as the stars. Promises that had endured through generations already. And he realized that this parable was another echo of that truth. That God's kingdom endures, multiplying across time. Above the lake, the stars shimmered brighter. countless points of light filling the heavens. Each one small, but together a testimony to the promise of endurance. The people lifted their eyes and felt their hearts open. For they remembered that what God plants, He sustains. What He promises, He fulfills. And tonight, this is true for you as well. Your faith does not end with you. It plants seeds in others. It becomes memory, testimony, shelter. It becomes strength for those who come after you. You may feel your faith is small, but even the smallest seed endures in God's hands. It can grow into a tree that blesses not only your own life, but lives beyond yours. Lives you may never see. This is the promise of the kingdom. That it does not fade with time. That it endures through trials, through storms, through seasons. That it multiplies across generations until the whole earth is filled with its shelter. The crowd by the lake heard the parable and wondered. Could such a small seed truly carry such promise? Yet as they listened, they felt peace. For they realized that the kingdom was not built on human strength, but on God's faithfulness. And His promises endure. Let your soul rest in this truth tonight. Your faith, however small, is alive. It will endure. It will multiply. It will carry peace beyond your own years. For God Himself tends the seed. He watches over it through every season. He sustains it through every storm. He brings forth fruit in His time. The mustard tree stands. Its seeds scattered. Its life multiplying. Its presence enduring. And so too does faith. The crowd by the lake slowly began to rise. Families gathered their children. Fishermen returned to their boats. Elders leaned on their staffs as they walked the path back toward the village. Yet though they left the hillside, the words remained with them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The phrase echoed quietly in their thoughts. Simple, small, and yet alive. For in those few words, Jesus had given them more than a picture. He had planted hope. He had given assurance that their smallest trust was not forgotten. The lake lay calm in the fading night. Stars mirrored in its waters. The air cool with the quiet of evening. And the teacher remained, his presence steady, his words already working like seeds in the soil of countless hearts. The parable had ended, but the kingdom had not. It had begun to grow. In the hidden places. In the silence of the people's souls. And so it is tonight. Your life is soil. Your heart carries seed. Perhaps your faith feels too small. Perhaps it feels fragile, unnoticed, weak. But hear again the promise. That even the smallest seed, when planted in God's hands, becomes more than you can imagine. Faith does not need to be large to be alive. It does not need to be loud to be heard. It does not need to be perfect to be enough. Faith only needs to be planted, entrusted to God, rooted in His love, nurtured by His Spirit, and He will bring the growth. The mustard seed becomes a tree. The smallest faith becomes a shelter. The quietest trust becomes testimony. So let your soul rest in this truth. You do not need to measure your faith tonight. You do not need to strive or prove or grasp. You only need to rest. To trust that God is tending the seed within you. Imagine now the mustard tree, standing full beneath the stars. Its branches wide. Its shade gentle. Its birds at rest. Nestled in its shelter, there is peace. And so it is with faith. It becomes not only strength for yourself, but rest for others. Close your eyes and let that picture settle within you. The seed has been planted. It is alive. It is growing. Even in silence. Even in hiddenness. Even in rest. For the God who spoke over the lake that evening still speaks over you tonight. His words are seed. His presence is shade. His kingdom is alive within you. And as you drift into sleep, let this assurance cradle you. Your faith, however small, is enough. The kingdom is growing. Unseen but certain. Slow but unstoppable. And the one who planted the seed will never leave it untended. The mustard seed grows. The kingdom endures. Faith rests secure.